How to make oneself unpopular, interrupting this great music we're listening to. But to avoid making myself even more unpopular, I promise you I won't try to sing. I was asked to say a few words about European security, but I really think we've heard enough and more than enough about European security in the course of the last 2 days. Let me therefore focus on another issue, which is Georgia. Tomorrow it's going to be the National Day, so I think it's good that we start focusing on that. And maybe later on we might have a toast together at that. And I want to say a few words on Georgia. I'm not, let me make a disclaimer at the beginning, I'm not an expert on Georgia. The most I spent here being 2 or 3 days. But I've come constantly in the course of the last 25 years. Issues related to Georgia, and I want to mention a few of them, very few of them, so little stories. The first goes back to 91. In 91 I had a different hat. I was working in NATO. I was the head of the Arms Control Department in the Secretariat. And we had just finalized the treaty, the CFE Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, which had been signed by all the states parties, including the Soviet Union. At the very end of that year, in 91, we had the first ministerial of the NACSI, the North Atlantic Cooperation Council, at the ministerial level, where suddenly the German Foreign Minister Genscher raised a finger and said, by the way, the Soviet Union is now declaring that it will cease to exist at the end of the year. What happens to the treaty just signed? So they gave me a task to retrieve all the successors of the Soviet Union and convene them to NATO as quickly as possible. So not everybody here might know that on the 12th of January of 1992, Georgia, brand new country that has found its independence, was sitting in NATO discussing with the NATO members and the other NACSI members what to do with the CFE Treaty and what to do with the Red Army, in a way, and the entitlements. That process lasted 6 months, so we had for 6 months Georgia sitting at the table of NATO in the very early 90s and developing a roadmap which was agreed by all. So Georgia was participating and agreeing to a document that was developed together with the NATO countries at the time. And that was the basis then for the internal agreement among the 8 successor states of the former Soviet Union on the CFE Treaty. Quite an interesting page that not everybody has in mind. Then of course things got more complicated with the CFE Treaty, and everybody in the arms control community learned about places called Baziani or Budauta or Batumi, of course, or Al-Khalaki, and the debates about the withdrawals and the inspections and all that. And then I found myself in another complicated thing, in a different hat. I was the chairman of the so-called negotiations on the adaptation of the CFE Treaty, when I was part of a team that drafted the so-called Istanbul Commitments, where there were issues related to the withdrawal from those bases, and which marked also a very difficult moment where we couldn't figure out the relationship between crisis management and conflict resolution and arms control. And in the end, we didn't really succeed very well in either of them by mixing them too much. But so that was the beginning of a new phase. Then I moved closer to the OSCE. I was director of a conflict prevention center, and I started coming here. We saw the Rose revolutions, we saw the political developments, and they came in different modes, in different times, on different occasions. Sad occasions, I was here for the funerals of Prime Minister Zvania at some point. Complicated occasions, I was here for a crisis involving some villages near Skin Valley. Actually, interesting memory from there. I met with the quote-unquote president called Kokoiti at the time, and again, quote-unquote foreign minister called Chochiev, I think was the name. And this prime minister, they all spoke rigorously Russian. I'm not a Russian speaker, so I always needed an interpreter. But at some point they pulled out of the bag a book in English. And the book was the real story of the way they were described the South Ossetian conflict. And they gave it to me. I still have that book on my bookshelf, because I think it's a model of how you can write history in a way that looks totally different from everything that you thought you had understood about a certain situation. So that also shows how difficult, how intricate, and how complex is the job of those who are engaging in trying to solve these complex situations. One other memory that I had is a trip to a beautiful place up on the mountains called Shatili. That was the main base that we had for a very large OSCE operations called the Border Monitoring Operation on the Chechnyan border. And we were there trying to track possible Chechen fighters. There were rumors they were coming down towards Pankisi, and we were trying and we had a few incidents there, a few close calls, but there was a fascinating thing and great places up on the mountains. Then I moved on to other things. I saw the war from distance, but when I came back to the OSCE, I realized that the war had changed a number of things. And one of them was that the OSCE, we used to have the third largest field operation here, after Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, was closed. The political conditions for us to continue working were no longer there. We engaged in different ways, through mechanisms to prevent local crises, the so-called IPRMs, and of course the Geneva process. So that was a new phase. But obviously, at the same time, and as we continued our engagement in the conflict, we continue also supporting the institutional political developments of the country. That also required a lot of engagement. We set up projects to monitor trials at a time when there were a lot of sensitive issues around that. We monitor all elections. There will be new elections coming up. But I think this is also a time to sit down and look back and see and think over these 25 years how far this country has come. And even though there are a number of issues still there, a number of problems, and the European security we're discussing is putting challenges, I think we should really appreciate and express our admiration for what has been accomplished in this very short time. I think our Georgian friends are keeping us busy, but we have seen, especially at the political level, even last weekend, we have seen that the debate is more than vibrant. But we will be ready to continue also with the international presence, to provide support, to provide presence, and to encourage progress that we have seen very tangible in so many areas. The governance has improved, the economy has improved, there are many good things. So I think with these words I would like to raise my glass to have a toast to peace, first of all, and to prosperity and a good future for Georgia. Cheers, all the best.